I read Binti by Nnedi Okorafor, which is a novella, the first in a series of three stories. This is a reread for me. I'm going to talk about all three stories, but I'm not going to spoil the connections between them as I move along. And so, for example, I won't talk at all about the second or third story in this podcast, but in the next podcast, I'll talk about how the second story is related to the first and etc. So Binti is a science fiction story set in a future where humans have achieved some kind of interstellar travel and have run into alien creatures out in the rest of the galaxy. Some humans have been invited to a university that is prestigious in the galaxy. And then there's also like a bunch of aliens there as well. And the main character, Binti, has been invited to this university. She is a prodigy, a genius. And while it's a recognition of how exceptional she is that she's invited to this university, she comes from a culture where they're very suspicious of outsiders and they don't interact with the wider world, or I guess universe in this case, very much. And so people in her hometown are basically not encouraging her to go do this. Her family doesn't really support her choice to go away to university at the other end of the galaxy. Binti's very young. She's like 16 or 17 years old. And she decides that she's basically going to run away from home to live out this dream. And so she takes just some basic supplies with her. There's an object that she found near her home that's like surrounded by desert. And out in the desert, she found this thing that she calls an Edan. I think that Nnedi made up this word. I don't, if it is a real word, I don't know it. Basically, it's just like an alien object that she doesn't understand the function of. But Binti is an expert in electronics. Her family make astrolabes, which in this story are kind of like smartphones are for us. So they kind of like do everything, it seems to me. And she understands intuitively how electronics work. And so she has a special connection to this object. But she's also curious about it because it's unknowable and alien. The metal is like unidentifiable and things like that. They don't know what the function of it is. And then in addition to that, so she takes her astrolabe, which she made herself. And then she also takes a big container of what's called ogize, which is a kind of clay mixed with like flowers and herbs that give the clay a strong scent. And this is used in her culture of the Himba people instead of regular bathing because of the region that they live in doesn't have access to fresh water. And so they spread the clay on their skin, which protects it kind of from getting dirty and helps to keep them cooler. And then also has this nice scent that's mixed into the clay. And she puts it especially in her hair. I think that the ogize is like really important to the story in a cool way. And I'm going to kind of swerve to talk about an academic of comparative literature who specialized in science fiction named Darko Suvin. And he came up with this concept about science fiction called the novum. And the idea is that in any given science fiction story that there's at least like one idea that is a kind of impossible or hard to achieve aspect versus our current reality. Like maybe there's like flying cars or interstellar space, some element in the story that's like impossible for us to achieve. And that element in the story does various work about ungluing our preconceptions about how the world works and what's going to happen in the future that allows us to see the world around us as it is right now in a new way. So he calls this cognitive estrangement. And like I said, usually this whole kind of thing is like something new or something different, something that we can't achieve. And so in the story, it would look like the Idan would be the thing, the novum of the story, because it's like this unknowable alien object and it miraculously kind of saves Binti later in the story. But I think in a sneaky way, the Ojize is really the novum in this story. And it does this interesting thing of because it's like an old technology, an ancient technology that strongly identifies Binti as someone who doesn't belong to any other culture. Like the other people, when she's on Earth getting onto the ship to go into interstellar space, the other people around her that see the Ojize in her hair are like grossed out by it and shocked. So this is not like a common thing that everybody has. And so it marks Binti out as someone who is different. And a lot of the story revolves around this theme of like alienation, that she's alienated from all of the other people who are outside of her culture than her, including, of course, actual aliens, right? And that she's leaving her culture, she's leaving her people like when they don't want her to, and she's kind of going against the norms of her society. And the Ojize is a way for her to hold on to her culture. It's a comfort to her in a very important way, but it's the thing also that marks her out. And so, like, we as readers probably also don't use Ojize. And so it might be a new concept to us. And so in that way, it is sort of a novum, but it's also like, does the work of estranging us from normal culture. Like, I feel sympathy for Binti that people are treating her badly just because of product that she puts in her hair. This is a very vulnerable thing for her. She's just trying to be authentic to her culture and the way that she's grown up, but she's not allowed to be. And this makes me feel resentful on her behalf and protective of her and helps me to bond with her. But then it also kind of peels away my preconceptions of what I experience in society around other people, right? So like if I saw somebody with a weird hairstyle or they had mud on their head, how would I behave? I would probably act a little bit like the people who are grossed out by her and stuff. And what else am I, other assumptions that I'm bringing to other people and probably hurting them the way that Binti is being hurt. And so all of that stuff, it achieves the cognitive estrangement, but instead of being like a very new thing, it's an extremely ancient thing. And so Okorafor does this cool thing, I think, of making something that is old into something that is new and having it do a lot of different thematic work simultaneously. And like, as short as this story is, I think it's very powerful. Like, she's able to get me to care about Binti very quickly. And the Ojize is a big part of that. And then additionally, later, the Ojize operates as a technology that, well, for one thing, she applies it to the Idan, and then that's when the Idan activates. And so when she's on her way to the university, the ship that she's on is attacked by these jellyfish kind of alien creatures called the Medusa. And they kill everybody else on the ship except for her. She's able to lock herself into her room. And then when they do come in, she's activated the Idan and it repels the aliens from her. It like harms them somehow. But then simultaneously, it allows her to communicate with them. And nobody else has been able to achieve communication with the Medusa. So she's the first person to do this because of the technology. But the technology only works because I think of the Ojize and her mental connection to it. The way that it was like the pathway for her to mentally connect to the Adan, in other words. She's like spreading it on the Adan because she's like in despair that she's going to be murdered by these aliens. But she's able to negotiate with them. She's able to show them that they're afraid of all humans because they've been hunted down by them. And the humans treat them like monsters, and they have dismembered their chieftain. They have like these stingers inside of their bodies, and the stinger has been removed from their leader and is on display in the museum at the university that she's going to. And so they want to get that stinger back. That's the motivation that they have in the story. And when Binti harms one of these creatures, his name is Okowu. Her and Okowu begin communicating with each other, and they come to a kind of understanding, and they form a truce. But in the course of that dialogue, she is stung or like attacked kind of by the Medusa. One of them uses their stinger on her, and she goes into a coma. And when she wakes up, she has, instead of her hair that is, so important to her and her culture, some of the strands of the hair now are the tentacles of the Medusa are like growing out of her head. And so she's been kind of made into a hybrid alien kind of creature. And so when she lands at the university, she's able to negotiate a truce between the university administration and these Medusa and get them back the stinger, in trade of having Okowu go to the university and having a kind of cultural exchange so that they can learn more about the Medusa, and using Binti as like translator. And so Okowu and Binti will be kind of together in the academic year going forward, is the deal that is struck. But you can see symbolically what Okorafor is doing here, that Binti was made to be different because of the Ojize, and then leaving her culture alienated her from her own people. And then she is literally made into a kind of alien partial form. And then landing at the university, she becomes a singular person who is like going to escort around the total alien creature that everyone is afraid of, the Medusa. And so there's just like the entire theme of Binti is around alienation. And it's literalized, in the way that like she goes to an alien planet and like there are literal aliens. And so I just think it's really smart use of the alien trope in science fiction. And there's like, between all the books, a big emphasis on biology as such. And so this biological component of changing what she is into more of an alien form is also super interesting. And so for such a short story, there's like just a ton of stuff packed in here. And I think that she is taking the conventions of the genre and like flipping them on their head, but simultaneously making the elements of the story do 2 or 3 or even 4 times the amount of work that other writers would do in the same space. So it's a dense story that seems pretty simple on the surface, but I think the more you look at it and the more you analyze its structure and themes, you can see that it's actually quite deep.